Pokémon is now, officially, the highest-grossing media franchise in human history. Not Mickey Mouse, not Star Wars, not Hello Kitty, not Harry Potter. Total lifetime revenue approximately $288 billion. In 2024 alone, over $12 billion. A $1.2 billion increase from the year before. For 30 years, this Japanese franchise has quietly outperformed every American cultural empire ever built. But here is the part almost no one outside Japan understands. Pokémon did not begin as a giant global empire. It began as an idea by a two-person Japanese startup, presented to Nintendo in 1990. And it took 6 years of near failure to reach store shelves. As a Japanese TV writer, and as someone currently working on the composition of a Japanese Pokémon television program, right now, I know why this happened. And it is not what most Western fans think. 5 stories almost no one knows. The Pokémon franchise began with the release of Pokémon Red and Green for Game Boy on February 27, 1996. The concept was created by Satoshi Tajiri, a young game designer inspired by his childhood love of collecting insects, and by the capsule monsters of the Japanese TV series Ultra 7. The anime, which brought Pikachu to the world, launched in April 1997. It has now aired in 192 countries and territories worldwide. By 2026, the Pokémon franchise consists of games, anime, films, trading cards, Pokémon Go, apparel, plush toys, cafes, restaurants, and every category of merchandise you can imagine. It is, in absolute revenue terms, the most successful media property ever created. Now, the 5 things. 1. The Pokémon franchise was created by a two-person company that had no chance of succeeding. In 1990, when Satoshi Tajiri brought the Capsule Monsters project proposal to Nintendo, his company, Game Freak, had exactly 2 employees. 2 people. Nintendo, at the time, was already one of the largest game companies on Earth. They could have chosen a huge established studio. Instead, they chose a tiny, 2-person startup with an unfinished concept about collecting creatures. Development took 6 years. During that time, Game Freak nearly went bankrupt. They ran out of money. They took on other work, including developing a game called Yoshi's Egg for Nintendo, just to keep the lights on. Nintendo did not push them to finish. Nintendo did not fire them. Nintendo simply waited. By the time Pokémon Red and Green shipped in 1996, Game Freak had grown to 9 employees. 9. Making what would become the most successful media property in human history. This is a business decision so patient, so unusual, so uniquely Japanese, that it barely makes sense in the modern American venture capital world. And yet, this is exactly what made Pokémon possible. 2. Pokémon's central concept, trading, was invented for a technical accident nobody knew what to do with. The Game Boy had a small feature that most game developers ignored: a cable that let 2 Game Boys connect to each other. Nobody had figured out how to use this cable in a way that made playing games better. It seemed like a novelty. Some games used it for 2-player battles, and that was about it. Tajiri became obsessed with this cable. He looked at that cable and asked one question: what if the entire game revolved around this? What if you couldn't complete the game alone? What if you had to physically meet another player, connect your Game Boys, and exchange something? That is where the word, trading, the entire central mechanic of Pokémon, came from. You cannot catch all 151 original Pokémon by yourself. Some Pokémon only appeared in one version of the game. Some Pokémon could only evolve through trading. You had to know another player. You had to meet them. You had to work together. This is why Pokémon became a phenomenon in Japanese elementary schools first. Not because it was marketed. Because kids in Japan realized that owning the game meant nothing. You needed a friend. Word spread by mouth. From child to child, from school to school. Pokémon did not conquer Japan through advertising. It conquered Japan because of a cable. 3. Pokémon is a 4-company partnership, a corporate structure almost no other Japanese IP uses. Most successful Japanese IP is owned by one giant company. Dragon Ball belongs to Toei and Shueisha. Studio Ghibli films belong to Ghibli. Pokémon is different. Pokémon is jointly owned and operated by 4 different Japanese companies: Nintendo, Game Freak, Creatures, and the Pokémon Company. Each of these 4 has a specific role. Nintendo publishes the games globally. Game Freak develops them. Creatures manages the trading card game. The Pokémon Company, founded in 1998 specifically for this purpose, manages the entire brand, the anime, the merchandise, licensing, and international expansion. This 4-company structure is one of the most sophisticated IP management systems in the world. It requires trust, careful coordination, and clear separation of responsibilities. And it works. It has worked for 30 years. This is how Pokémon has scaled to reach 192 countries, generate $288 billion in lifetime revenue, and remain culturally relevant across 3 separate generations of children. 4. The Pokémon anime was born because of the game, not the other way around. Most anime is adapted from manga. Some is adapted from novels or games with existing followings. Pokémon anime was different. It was launched in April 1997 specifically to expand the audience for the game. From children who read gaming magazines to children who watched television and to children who did not yet play video games at all. The anime team designed the show for this specific purpose. They chose a young protagonist, Ash, who any child could relate to. They chose Pikachu, a cute, expressive electric mouse, as his partner. They centered the entire story on the emotional bond between a child and his monster friend. This was, in retrospect, a masterful marketing and storytelling decision. The anime made the game accessible to millions of children who might otherwise never have picked up a Game Boy. And once they watched the anime, they wanted to play the game. And once they played the game, they wanted to watch more anime. This feedback loop: anime creates game demand. Game creates anime demand is one of the most powerful cross-media marketing systems ever engineered. Every Japanese anime franchise since Pokémon has tried to replicate it. Very few have succeeded at this scale. 5. Pokémon quietly continues to expand, and Japan is still inventing new formats for it. You might think Pokémon reached its peak years ago. It has not. In 2024 alone, the Pokémon franchise generated over $12 billion. A $1.2 billion increase over the previous year. Pokémon Go has 110 million monthly active users. The trading card game reached record sales in 2024. Nintendo Switch Pokémon titles continue to top annual global sales charts. And behind the scenes, in Japan, new formats keep being created. I say this with direct knowledge, because I am currently working on the composition of a Japanese Pokémon television program. The team that produces Pokémon content in Japan does not treat this franchise as an old success to be maintained. They treat it as a living thing that must be reinvented, over and over, for each new generation. This is why Pokémon continues to grow, 30 years after its release. Not because of luck, not because of nostalgia, because a network of Japanese writers, animators, game designers, and producers is still, right now, actively imagining what Pokémon can become next. So why should you understand Pokémon? Because everything about it: the 2-person startup, the 6-year development, the trading mechanic born from a cable, the 4-company partnership, the anime game feedback loop, and the ongoing Japanese reinvention is proof of one thing: the most successful cultural export in human history came from patience, collaboration, and the courage to trust a small idea for as long as it takes. After 30 years inside Japanese television, and as someone currently working on Pokémon content in Japan today, this is what I see when I look at this franchise. Now you do too. If there is another Japanese property you'd like me to break down next, comment below. See you next time. This was Keizo TV. Please subscribe. Please subscribe.